I just wanna tell you how I'm feeling. Gonna make you understand. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna say goodbye. Never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. Oh, sorry, I didn't realise the camera was on. I was just busy, Anyway. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we're going to be talking a little bit about big old Davy boy David Tennant. But before we get into it, if you could do me a teeny tiny little favour and click that subscribe button, that'd be ever so much appreciated. We are trying to get to 15,000 subscribers as quickly as possible, and we are just about 90 subscribers away from 15,000, so do me a favour, hit the subscribe button, it'd be greatly appreciated. Also, go follow me on Twitter if you don't already, as I post my regular Doctor Who opinions over there. But with that said, let's get into the video. So a common comment I've been receiving ever since the announcement of David Tennant and Catherine Tate is, if David Tennant and Catherine Tate are the only people coming back, then I'm not watching the 60th. So what I wanted to do is basically see, would it necessarily be a bad thing if David Tennant was the only returning Doctor for the 60th anniversary? So what I did was I asked you guys on my community feed. I said, question, how would you feel about Tennant being the only Doctor returning for the 60th anniversary? And this poll got 1,200 votes in a day, which is kind of insane. But the results of the poll are quite interesting. So 26% of people says, I'm fine with it, no problems with that at all. I'm more than down for what's going on, which is great. However, another 67% said it's okay, but I'd prefer other Doctors be included too. Followed by a 7% saying I don't like it, and then I said feel free to specify why in the comments below. Now the results of this poll are quite interesting because, while yes, the bulk aren't saying, that they hate the idea, about 74% of people say they would prefer the 60th if it featured other Doctors including Tennant. And the answers to the poll are quite interesting. So we're going to go over some of your thoughts, as well as where I sit on the whole Tennant being the main Doctor for the 60th thing. I have mixed feelings about it. The 60th anniversary episode is a big deal for the show and fans of the show, so it should be something that feels unique, special, and a celebration of Doctor Who's history. And while it could work as a debut episode for Ncuti Gatwa, I feel there's too much pressure, unfair expectations to put on him in one episode. I would agree. I think starting on an anniversary is a really hard thing to do. But I also feel like casting David Tennant is a decision that overshadows the fact that Ncuti Gatwa will be the next Doctor Who, and makes us wonder how the episode will fit in the Doctor Who universe. I have confidence in RTD's writing, and additional adventures feel like the most logical option considering it happens all the time with Big Finish audio, stories, and other media. But I feel like it's a very thin line to tread, and suddenly to have David Tennant back after 10 years without much explanation. Interesting. It's interesting that this person thinks that, the way they'll explain it is basically just that it's some lost adventures, akin to something like a Big Finish where they're just more 10th Doctor and Donna adventures. I would say that given the filming stuff, I think there's more to the stuff going on, but I think this is a very reasoned response. I have seen that response before, that the idea that perhaps having David Tennant come back to lead the anniversary could overshadow the announcement of Ncuti. However, I feel like it's a case where the two are so far apart that they allow the room for each other. I think a good comparison point would be something like how David Tennant came back for the 50th, but also Peter Capaldi was announced to be the next Doctor before the 50th came out. I feel like in that instance, people were hyped for both, and I think that could still happen here. I would love to have seen McGann given how little screen time he had, but so much to explore. He has a fantastic presence on both screen and audio. I would love to see him back longer than what we got for Night of the Doctor. I would love to see McGann back. I've said before, I went through a phase of McGann being one of my favourite Doctors, and I still love McGann's performance. I think he's absolutely wonderful. I love his costume. I love his whole vibe. I'd love to see him on screen again. So yeah, I would really like it if he was on screen. The thing is, it increasingly feels like he is seen as a way to make sure fans like the specials and any episodes he is in, more or less like a protective shield. I have a feeling David Tennant is already too relied upon. Yeah, this is another idea I've seen sort of posited, the idea that the Doctor Who brand as a whole is already kind of too reliant on David Tennant, what with spin-off media and stuff like that, and that's even a point I've made in the past. I think the difference here though for me is that I know that there's going to be a next iteration afterwards, so I'm not too worried about this becoming a permanent fixture. And in addition, I think the fact that David does appear to be playing a slightly different Doctor has alleviated some of my concerns that it's just going to be, 2008 again. But I do understand why it would seem like that from an outside perspective, absolutely. I definitely prefer to have some more returns, specifically Capaldi. I really want to see 10 and 12 interact. Oh yeah, that'd be fun. They have some really interesting dynamics in the comics. That said, if only it's going to be one Doctor, I'd want it to be 10. especially compared with Donna and Wolf. That's fair, you know. I think there are all Doctors that we want to see back. I mean, personally, for me, Matt Smith is that, you know, that incarnation that I would really love to see back. He's my favourite. But at the same time, you know, if you are going to get one back, Tennant's the one that makes the logical sense. He's like the general public's favourite. He's a fan favourite, you know, he's consistently topping the polls. He comes from arguably Doctor Who's most popular period. It does kind of make sense for him to be leading it. If we get clips of all the Doctors, like what happened with the 50th, I'd be fine with that. Yeah, this is another thing, like, you know, archive footage can also be a thing that's used. And I think, actually, you know, the scene at the end of Day of the Doctor, for me, when all the Doctors are saving Gallifrey, is really epic and cool. And that doesn't really feature, you know, many of the Doctors actually being present in that scene, and yet it still feels really cool. I've also seen some people saying that the 50th didn't do enough to celebrate Classic Who, and while I kind of get it, I do somewhat disagree. I feel like, you know, having what was in the actual episode with, like, the Zygons, Coal Hill School, Unit, obviously that scene at the end with all the Doctors playing the classic 60s title sequence, for me, I felt like they did quite a good job of celebrating the whole show. Maybe with a bit more leaning towards New Who, but there's a couple of logistical reasons for that, due to the fact that, obviously, those are the ones that are youngest and are able to do it as well. But I also think, you know, you had things like Five-ish Doctors and Adventure in Space and Time surrounding the 50th anniversary, which to me made it feel like a much more rounded experience, and I would consider things like Adventure in Space and Time, the Five-ish Doctors, and Night of the Doctor to be just as part of the 50th as Day was. So I'm not going to rule out the possibility as well that other things could also encompass the 60th anniversary. I also just feel a tad bit sorry for Stephen Moffat. If you go back and watch some interviews with him, he makes it kind of clear that there was a genuine possibility that the only person that was going to be in the 50th was Jenna Coleman, because that was the only person who was under contract. And that he had a lot of difficulty convincing certain people to do it, and the BBC had their own expectations. So I do kind of have a lot of empathy for Stephen Moffat in that situation, but I digress. But to give my overall thoughts on the idea of Tennant returning, I quite like it, and the reason I quite like it is that it's something new. And you might be sitting there going, how is David Tennant returning to Doctor Who new? He's done it a bunch of times in a bunch of different mediums. Yes, but as I sort of stated before, it's not the David Tennant Doctor that we know. For all we can tell, he is playing a different incarnation of the Doctor. He has a different TARDIS exterior, different costume, he looks different. For all intents and purposes, he's not being the 10th Doctor from what we can tell. And that's fascinating to me. I think the idea of there being, you know, an altered, weird regeneration is interesting and exciting, because it's not one we've really seen before. We've not seen a regeneration that goes backwards and them having to try and explain, okay, why have I got this face back? What have we got to do? The closest we probably got to that was the cancelled Dark Dimension project, where in this alternate timeline, Ford never regenerates the end of the Gopolis, and it basically creates this Bizarro timeline. That's about as close as we got to that idea, and I've always thought that was a really cool idea to be realised. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see cameos from other Doctors, but if I'm being completely honest, I do think there are some limitations to the multi-Doctor format. I do feel like after you've done one basically every anniversary for so long, it gets to a point where you just sort of run out of things to do with them. They've all sort of tackled them in their own ways. 3 Doctors, you know, the first one, has a lot of 2 and 3 together, you know, they face off Omega, it's great. 5 Doctors, it's more focusing on them being separate, they all land on Gallifrey, and they're all trying to stop this one thing, and they all come together mainly at the end. And then you also have things like Dimensions in Time, but we don't need to talk about that, and then you get things like Day of the Doctor, which, from all intents and purposes, is more of a return to that 3 Doctors style of having all the Doctors interact all the way through, but with a more sort of New Who tinge to it. So I feel like they've all brought their own sort of flavour to the multi-Doctor format, and I do see how having that same story again, having basically a 50th again, could feel a little bit stale. So the idea of there being one central Doctor returning for what seems to be multiple episodes in a new-ish role would be a really interesting idea, I think. I think as well, logistically, from a public perception perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. It makes all the sense in the world to have Tennant be the main Doctor, to basically lead an anniversary, and basically be the regeneration on from Jodie. It'll get on board all the people who said, you know, oh, I stopped watching when Tennant left. So personally, to wrap up my overall thoughts on the idea of Tennant being the main, like, or only returning Doctor for the 60th, I'm fine with it, because I think the story surrounding it looks interesting, but I would love it if there were other Doctors, even in just cameo roles, like what was proposed in something like Dark Dimension. But even if there isn't, I'm just really excited by what we've been seeing of recent. But let me know in the comments below how you feel about the idea of Tennant being the only Doctor returning for the 60th. Comment down below your thoughts, like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later. Shout out to Debs Iona, Shane Smith, Ree Keffin, Seb Lowndes, Jay Monroe, Shandycoot, Patrick Musson, Simon Ashley, Steve Safaro, Andrew Townsend, Alex Robbins, Michael Dykes, Paul Bryden, Sam Yates, Michael Rhodes, Jerry the Meerkat, Heretic, Cameron Jefferson, John M, Andrew Evanson, JM97, Gallifreyan Rob, Cliff's Random Siliness, Kyle McCroy, Nova Wolf Gaming, Carol Jude, Mr. KNL, Autumn Matthews, Josh Rocks 123, The Raggedy Jedi, Upmixed Time Lord, Ian. If you want to become a member, feel free to do so. It really helps out. You get exclusive posts, shout outs in every video, and even your own badge and custom emojis to use.